Alright, hello and welcome back to the channel. For this video, I want to talk about shields in Pathfinder, because I think the way they've been implemented is pretty cool. In a lot of other systems, shields are just kind of a thing you put onto your character sheet and kind of forget about. You calculate the AC bonus into your total character AC, and so you just kind of don't interact with them, you don't put them on your character sheet. However, in Pathfinder, they've actually made it so that you have to spend an action on each turn to actively raise your shield to actually be able to get the AC bonus. Now, I think this is a pretty cool design choice, and because of this, you really have to think about how shields are going to impact your character in actual play. You can't just stick a shield on your arm and call it a day. You have to really plan your character out being able to have that action spare to raise the shield. And if you want to have that reaction spare to shield block, if you want to be able to reduce incoming damage with your shield as well. And then somewhat recently I came across this Stance stance, which is a stance available to champions of fires at first level and bastions at a higher level. And when you're in this stance, you wield your shield with two hands instead of just the one. It increases the damage dice of the shield, but also increases the shield's hardness by 2 when using the shield block reaction. I think, especially because this is available so early, that this could be a pretty cool basis for a very high AC, very tanky character that walks around with their shield and just uses that in combat and nothing else. So with that idea in mind, I wanted to take this video to go through and see just how well we can invest in using our shield, and probably only our shield in combat, and how valuable that actually is in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. So to start, let's just go over how shields actually work in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. The first and most important action related to shields is, of course, raise your shield. This is available to anyone, no matter what class you are, and all it requires is you have your shield, you spend an action to raise it, granting its AC bonus as a circumstance bonus to your armor class until the start of your next turn. And then, of course, there's the shield block general feat, available at first level and also given for free to a number of martial classes. While you have your shield raised and you take damage from physical attack, you can shield block it, reducing the damage by the shield's hardness, and then both you and the shield take the remaining damage. For example, if you're about to be hit for 10 bludgeoning damage, your shield has 5 hardness. You can shield block, and then instead of you taking 10 damage, both you and your shield will take 5 damage. Next, looking at the base shields available in the game. For the purposes of tanking, really there are two options, the steel shield and the tower shield. The steel shield gives a +2 bonus to your AC, and that has a hardness of 5 and HP of 20. The tower shield, on the other hand, has that same +2 AC bonus, same hardness, same HP, and also a -5 with speed ability, but in exchange, once you raise your shield, you can actually spend another action to take cover behind your shield, turning that +2 circumstance bonus into a total of +4 to your AC. And finally, if we want to be raising our AC as much as possible, we also have to look at the armors available in the game. There are 3 types, light, medium, and heavy armor, and of course unarmored for people who don't wear any armor at all. The thing with armor is, if you look at this column, with a few exceptions for things that aren't really meant to be worn as armor, like padded armor, all of unarmored, light armor, and medium armor give you a total of +5 to your AC bonus between the item bonus and the dexterity cap. Leather armor is +1 +4, or chain shirt is +2 +3, chainmail is 4-1, etc. However, heavy armor allows you to get to up to a +6 item bonus to your +6 total bonus to your AC. Split mail is +5 +1, half plate is +5 +1, and each of the plate armors are +6 +0. So if you want to be stacking your armor class as high as you can get it, really what you're going to want is high proficiency in heavy armor. So with the general overview out of the way, let's look at some of the feats available to increase our shield's efficacy and our armor class in combat. The first is going to be Dwarven Reinforcement available at level 5. This allows you to increase hardness of an item by a set amount based on your proficiency in crafting, scaling up to a +3 hardness if you're legendary in crafting. The next feat is from the Reinforced Heritage, which is uncommon, but at level 5 allows you to take Fortified Shield, which as an action allows you to raise your shield, and then if you shield block before your next turn, you add your character level, so up to +20 to your shield's hardness when determining the damage reduced. Now this is only once per day, and you do have to anticipate it, because Fortified Shield is the action to raise the shield. However, if you know you're about to take a big hit, you can Fortify Shield and Shield Block and reduce that damage incoming to you by up to 20 points, which is pretty obscene. And finally, for ancestry feats, I also want to call out Unburdened Iron, available as well to dwarves at level 1. This allows you to reduce speed penalties from armor and other sources, which is really important if we're going to be trying to bump our AC as high as possible, because full plate imposes a speed penalty even if you meet the strength requirements, and tower shields that we looked at before also impose a speed penalty. So with this one ancestry feat, you can remove both of those penalty, effectively giving yourself +10 to your movement speed, which is pretty huge, and turns you from a slow, lumbering snail who can hardly get anywhere in the battlefield to someone who can actually almost keep up with the other ancestries. Now onto classes, and of course if we want to be an incredibly key character, the first class that we're going to think of is Champion, and for good reason. Champions at first level get shield block for free, meaning they don't have to spend a general feat to be able to use their shield to reduce damage. And at level 17, eventually become legendary in armor, including legendary in heavy armor, which means their AC, just at base, is going to outrank basically every other character in the game, because most other characters, even other martial characters, are only going to reach up to Master in their chosen armors. Additionally, at level 3, the champion gets access to their Divine Ally, and specifically their Shield Divine Ally allows us to increase our shield's hardness by 2 and its HP and broken threshold by half, allowing us to shield block more often than other characters, even other champions that have taken different Divine Allies. So now moving on to the champion feats available to us. Of course, at first level we get Ever Stance Dance, and this leads to a level 4 Ever Stance Strike, which does have the press trait, but it allows us to strike, and if that strike hits, we can raise our shield all in the same action. Next, at level 2, we have Devoted Guardian, where if our last action was to raise the shield, then we can spend another action to give a circumstance bonus to an adjacent creature. So if we have an ally next to us, we can raise our shield and spend a second action covering up for our ally and also giving them a circumstance bonus to their AC. At level 8, we have Quick Shield Block, which allows us an additional reaction every turn that we can use to shield block. And at level 12, we have Divine Wall, which makes each space around us difficult terrain for enemies while we are wielding a shield, meaning that not only is it harder for enemies to get to our back line, but also means that if we get up into an enemy, they can't step away from us, because stepping requires you to not be in difficult terrain, which makes it even harder for them to escape without retaliation. At level 12, we have Necromantic Deflection, which allows our shield to apply its benefits against necromancy spells, even necromancy spells that require things like a will or fortitude save, or that deal non-physical damage. And finally, at level 20, we have our Divine Ally Shield Capstone, which allows us to have our shield constantly raised without needing to spend an action. And we also double our shield's HP, and if it is destroyed, it will vanish into our Divine Realm, where it will come back to us fully repaired on our next day. And finally, we have a few feats that are locked behind Tenants of Good, which, if you're building a tanky champion built around protecting his ally, is probably not going to be a problem. At level 6, we have Shield Warden, which allows us to, when we have our shield raised, shield block for our allies, reducing damage that's being directed at them instead of yourself. This leads to, at level 10, Shield of Reckoning, which allows us to, as a single reaction, use Shield Warden and our champion's reaction simultaneously. And at level 16, Shield of Grace, which allows us to take on some of that incoming damage so that our ally suffers even less damage when we use Shield Warden to protect them. Now, while champions are the obvious choice for stacking AC, I do want to give a quick shout out to the monk, which, unique among the classes other than champion, also manages to obtain legendary proficiency in unarmored defense. Now, normally this would still put them one below the champion's AC, because unarmored AC follows Explorer's Clothing, which still caps you out at +5. However, if you have the Mountain Stance feat, the monk can grant themselves a +4 item bonus to AC, and then with the following feats, Mountain Stronghold and Mountain Quake, you can get up to a +2 dex modifier to that AC, meaning that at the end of the game, a monk can reach +6 to their base unarmored AC, plus legendary proficiency, and all the normal runes that you would acquire, meaning that their armor class is on par with a fully heavily armored champion, which I think is pretty cool. However, for our purposes, I still think champion is going to be the better choice, because monk, 1, doesn't get access to shield block innately, and 2, loses access to a lot of the other really incredible shield support abilities the champions get, including things like Divine Ally. So while monk is certainly an option for a high AC tanky character, it's probably not going to beat out champions, at least in this case. So just like there was a pretty clear winner for what class we want to choose for our purposes, there's also a pretty clear winner for the best archetype we want to choose, and that is the Bastion dedication. At level 2, we straight up just give Reactive Shield for free, which allows us to, as a reaction, raise our shield to gain its AC against an opponent's attack. So no longer do we have to spend an action on our turn, we can wait until we actually need the AC to spend the reaction to raise. Of course, this conflicts with shield block, but just gives you a little more flexibility in allowing you to spend your actions during your turn. Of course, the reason why Passion Dedication is so good is not only does it get a number of the shield-related champion feats, things like Everstand Stance, Quick Shield Block, etc., it also has a number of unique feats to the archetype that help with shield blocking. Starting with Disarm Block at level 4, where if we shield block someone who attacks us with weapon, we can immediately disarm the creature attacking us, meaning we can inflict a circumstance penalty to their future attacks on that turn. Next we have Shielded Stride at level 6, which allows us, if our shield is ready, to stride up to half our speed without triggering reactions like an attack of opportunity. At level 8 we have Drive Back, where if someone tries to attack our ally, we can, as a reaction, shove the enemy away. Now they do still get to make the attack, however they will take a circumstance penalty to that attack if our shove succeeds. Again at level 8 we have Reflexive Shield, which allows us to raise our shield and use its benefits against reflex saves, such as fireballs. It allows us to both apply the bonus to our save and also shield block even if the damage isn't going to be physical. Next at level 10 we have Destructive Block, which allows us when we shield block to double our shield's hardness, but also double the damage this shield would have taken during that shield block. Allows us to save a little extra health on our side in return for dealing a little extra damage to our shield. At level 12 we have Mirror Shield, where if someone crit fails a spell attack against us, we can actually reflect that spell back against the original caster using our attack rolls. And finally, again at level 12, we have Shield Salvation, where if our shield would be destroyed during a shield block, we can, once per day, save that shield, keep it at 1 HP, and allow us to repair it, making sure that a valuable shield isn't destroyed due to unlucky high roll damage. So Bastion is the pretty clear winner for shield archetypes that we want to choose. I do want to give a quick shout out to the uncommon Night Vigilant archetype, which at level 20 gives us Tower Shield Mastery, which allows us to be constantly quickened, using the additional action only to take cover behind our tower shield after we have raised it, which grants us that additional +2 bonus over the normal AC bonus that a tower shield and other shields, normal steel shields, would grant. Now I want to go over some of these specific shields that I think would be especially useful for this character. First and foremost is going to be the Sturdy Shield, which has the highest hardness and HP for any shield of its level, starting at hardness 8, HP 64, level 4, and scaling all the way up to hardness 20, HP 160, surpassing even high hardness materials like adamantine. For comparison, a level 16 Sturdy Shield has hardness 17 and HP 136, whereas a level 16 high-grade adamantine shield only has hardness 13 and HP of 52, not even 1/3 of the HP of a Sturdy Shield. What this means is that if you want to be consistently reducing incoming damage by a shield block, you really want to invest in a Sturdy Shield, because a lot of other shields will quickly be destroyed by the high damage incoming from enemies, especially as you increase in level. However, there are a couple other shields which I think have good utility that a Sturdy Shield can't really provide. Starting at level 6 with a Spellcard Shield, this allows you to apply the Circumstance bonus to saves against spells that target you. And this means not only can you shield block someone stabbing you with a knife, you can also shield block someone's Scorching Ray, or even someone's Charm or Dominate Person. Next, at level 10, we have the uncommon Forge Ward, and this has the special trigger whenever you shield block to deal 2d6 retaliatory fire damage against the person who attacked you. Now, this is unique in PF2 in that this fire damage doesn't have a save, and while it's not a ton of fire damage, it still is free damage whenever you shield block, and if you're going to be shield blocking a lot, this can add up somewhat quickly. Of course, the shield itself isn't going to stand up to that kind of abuse, but if you want to make sure you're doing a little extra damage with the shield block, Forge Ward is an easy way to go about it. Next we have the rare Indestructible Shield at level 18. This does exactly what it says on the tin. It cannot be damaged except in very specific situations, such as via a disintegrate spell or artifact specifically designed for destruction. So if you really want to make sure your shield will never break, an Indestructible Shield, assuming you can convince your GM to give you one, can be a good investment. However, this isn't necessarily strictly better than a Sturdy Shield, because the Indestructible Shield has significantly lower hardness. At level 18, it only has a hardness of 13, whereas the level 16 Sturdy Shield already has a hardness of 17, and that'll increase to 20 at level 19. So long as you aren't dealing somehow 160 points of damage to your Sturdy Shield in single combat, and you have time afterwards to repair it back up to full, or maybe even have a second Sturdy Shield as backup, the Indestructible Shield doesn't really have a ton of utility. Next at level 18 we have the Reflecting Shield. Now this is only a buckler, meaning it will only give you +1 to your AC when you raise your shield. However, in exchange, once per day, you can reflect a spell as with spell turning, which means you make a counteract check, in this case with a +30, and if you succeed, not only do you negate the spell's effects on you, you actually turn that spell's effects back on the original caster. And finally, we have the Shield of the Unified Legion, which is notable because whenever you raise this shield, you also effectively raise a shield for each of your allies within 30 feet, granting all of them a +2 circumstance bonus as long as they are within your aura. This allows you to just blanket wide give everyone the effects of raising shield without any of them having to invest any actions, hands, money, or actual character build on them. It's all you give that support to your allies. Now, as always, I want to provide a little sample build of how I would build this character if I were to actually create it in-game. So, of course, I'm going to go Dwarf, taking Dwarven Reinforcement at 5, which allows me to increase the hardness of my shield. Additionally, I want to pick up Unburdened Iron, so that when I'm running around with my Tower Shield and my Heavy Blade, I can actually keep up with the rest of my party members instead of moving at a sluggish 10 feet per round. I'd also like to take the Reinforced Heritage, which one is, I think, thematically relevant, but also gives me access to Fortified Shield, allowing me to shield block with my character level calculating into my hardness once per day. Now, unique among the builds that we've gone through so far, there are actually so many relevant shield feats that you could easily spend all of your class feats from 1 to 20 only on making your shield better, and still have a number of feats left over that you would really want to take. So in light of that, I'm only going to shout out a few of the ones that I think are most useful for someone who's using a shield. And then of course, if you want to lean more and go all in on shield using, that's something you can do for your character. So obviously we're going to be a champion, get it out in the best heavy armor we can get, and a level 1 straight away taking Everstand stance, so our shield can do actually decent damage and also increase its hardness. I want to make sure I'm good aligned so I can take shield warded to be able to shield block for my allies, eventually leading to Shield of Reckoning at 10, so I can shield block and use my champion's reaction simultaneously. At level 8, I want to pick up Quick Shield Block so that I can shield block and have an extra reaction to use as I wish. And finally, at level 20, pick up Shield Paragon so that my shield is constantly raised and I just have double HP on my shield. Just super make sure it never breaks, even if I'm shield blocking my enemies. Next, I want to go into the Passion Dedication so I can get Reactive Shield straight away, which isn't something champions normally get. Additionally, because so many of the champion shield related feats are also available in Bastion, I can trigger it so that I have feats I would have taken anyway in champion as my Bastion archetype feats, so that if I really wanted, I could take other archetypes basically without sacrificing anything. Moving onwards of the Bastion specific feats, I want Reflected Shield at 8 so I can use my shield against reflex saving throws, Destructive Block at 10 to really make sure if I'm in dire straits I can save myself even if it is at the expense of my shield, and at level 12 Shield Salvation so that when I do use that Destructive Block, or if I'm switching out to a utility shield that maybe doesn't have as much hardness or HP as a sturdy shield, that I can make sure my gold investment stays with me even if I'm using shield block aggressively. So, in summary, when I was investigating shields in BF2, I wasn't expecting such depth in the feat options to make shields a really powerful character building option in combat. As I said previously, in many of the other builds we've looked at previously, There were perhaps a lot of options, but they were spread out over a lot of classes. There were 3 or 4 feats a rogue could take, and 3 or 4 feats a ranger could take, 3 or 4 feats a wizard could take, and so on and so forth. Such that any single character could certainly dip into, for example, recalling knowledge, but it was hard for someone to go full force 100%. Whereas it is in fact incredibly easy for someone to spend every single one of their feats on relevant shield related abilities to make sure that they're the best defensive bastion that their team could ask for. I just think that that is really cool. Of course, this whole thing comes with a couple caveats, which is that a high AC is not the be all end all of TTRPG gaming. For one thing, there's nothing really forcing an enemy to attack you. If you sit there with high AC and do nothing but raise your shield all day, enemies can and probably will just walk around you and attack your squishier allies. You have to really encourage them to attack you either by investing so you actually do deal some damage, or make sure that you're so powerful defensively through things like the champion's reactions that to even touch your allies, they really have to go through you first. Secondly, there is more to defense than just armor class. There are a whole 3 saves, reflex, fortitude, and will to consider. Heavy blade and a big shield won't save you when the lich tries to mind control you. Luckily, champions do have pretty decent saves. They are mastered in fortitude and will, and eventually become expert in reflex saves. So this isn't the worst issue, because champions by default are going to be pretty good at resisting spell effects. However, this is something to keep in mind. Getting something like necromantic deflection, if you happen to be facing a lot of enemies wielding necromancy spells, can go a long way into helping your champion's mind be just as strong as their armor. So that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed this deep dive into shields, and I hope you come back next time for whatever we cover next. I haven't been decided yet, so it'll be a little surprise in 2 weeks. But regardless of that, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you come back with the next one. And above all, I hope you have a wonderful day.